The imperial palace of Zephyria stretched across 3 mountain peaks, its crystalline spires catching the light of twin suns. Within its halls, beings from across the galaxy bowed before Emperor Vorthak, the dragon lord whose scales shimmered like molten gold and whose breath could turn stone to glass. For 3,000 years, he had ruled the galactic dominion with an iron claw, commanding respect from every species except one: humans. Those strange, soft-skinned creatures from a backwater planet called Earth were considered the lowest form of life in the galaxy. They had no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, no impressive technology. They served only as janitors, cleaners, and laborers throughout the Empire. Most citizens barely noticed them, treating them like living furniture that happened to move around and clean things. Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart through the palace's medical wing, his worn jumpsuit bearing the faded insignia of Sanitation Division, Human Worker, Nara 47291. At 35, he had spent half his life cleaning the same corridors, invisible to the alien nobles who swept past him in flowing robes. The Zephyrians paid him just enough to afford a tiny room in the human quarters and basic nutrition cubes. As Marcus mopped the marble floors, he heard something that made him pause. A soft whimpering sound came from behind a door marked with warning symbols in the Imperial language. The door stood slightly ajar, unusual for this section of the palace where security was normally tight. Marcus glanced around. The corridor was empty except for him. Against his better judgment, he peered through the crack in the door. Inside lay a small figure on a massive bed designed for someone much larger. The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with the distinctive golden scales of imperial bloodline, but they were dull and flaking. The young prince's breathing was labored, and strange dark veins were visible beneath his translucent scales. His eyes, normally the brilliant amber of his species, had faded to a sickly yellow. The child noticed Marcus and tried to speak, but only managed a weak croak. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. He had seen this before on Earth, before the conquest. The symptoms matched a severe case of dehydration combined with what looked like organ failure. "Hey there, little guy," Marcus whispered, stepping into the room. "You look pretty rough." The young prince's eyes widened in surprise. In his 7 years of life, no one had ever spoken to him with such gentle kindness. The imperial physicians poked and prodded him with cold instruments while discussing his condition as if he weren't there. His father, the mighty emperor, had visited once, roared in frustration at the doctor's inability to help, and hadn't returned since. Marcus approached the bed slowly, setting down his mop. "Can you understand me? Blink once for yes, twice for no." One slow blink. "Good. Are you thirsty?" Another single blink, more urgent this time. Marcus looked around the room. It was filled with advanced alien medical equipment, crystalline monitors displaying vital signs in languages he couldn't read, and floating droids that hummed with mysterious energy. But nowhere did he see the most basic necessity of life. "They haven't been giving you water, have they?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with disbelief. 2 blinks for no. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. How could they make such a basic mistake? On Earth, even the most primitive human civilizations understood the importance of hydration during illness. But these advanced aliens, so proud of their superior intellect and technology, had overlooked the simplest solution. "The doctors think you need complex treatments," Marcus said, more to himself than to the child. "But sometimes the simplest answer is the right one." He looked at his cleaning cart and smiled grimly. Among his supplies was a bottle of purified water meant for mixing with cleaning chemicals. It was the same water the humans drank, processed through basic filtration systems that the aliens considered primitive. Marcus unscrewed the cap and helped lift the young prince's head. "Small sips," he said gently. Too much, too fast, will make you sick. The child drank eagerly, and within minutes, his breathing became less labored. The dark veins under his scales began to fade slightly. Marcus had seen this miracle dozens of times during his youth on Earth, where he had worked as a paramedic before the conquest. Simple dehydration, complicated by the body's inability to process the artificial nutrients being pumped into him intravenously. "The doctors don't understand your species' basic needs, do they?" Marcus mused, continuing to give the child small amounts of water. "They're so focused on advanced medicine that they forgot the basics." As the young prince's condition visibly improved, Marcus heard footsteps in the corridor, heavy, measured steps that could only belong to Imperial guards. He quickly helped the child lie back down and moved toward his cart. "I'll come back," he promised in a whisper. "But I need to be careful. If they catch me in here—" The child reached out with a small, scaled hand and touched Marcus's wrist. For the first time in days, his voice worked well enough to speak. "Thank you," he whispered in perfect galactic standard, his young voice hoarse but filled with genuine gratitude. Marcus felt his heart clench. In all his years of service, no one in the palace had ever thanked him for anything. He was just part of the scenery, a human tool that cleaned and maintained their world. "What's your name?" Marcus asked quickly, hearing the footsteps getting closer. "Therion," the child replied. I am the Crown Prince." Marcus's blood ran cold. He had just given water to the Emperor's heir, the future ruler of the galaxy. If the guards found him here, he would be executed without trial. "I have to go, Therion," Marcus said, grabbing his mop. "But I promise I'll find a way to help you properly." As Marcus slipped out of the room and resumed mopping the corridor, two massive Zephyrian guards passed by without even glancing at him. To them, he was just another human performing his menial duties, invisible and unimportant. But in that medical room, Crown Prince Therion stared at the door where his unlikely savior had disappeared, hope flickering in his young heart for the first time since his illness began. That night, Marcus lay on his thin mattress in the human quarters, staring at the ceiling and planning. The young prince needed more than just water. He needed proper nutrition, rest, and someone who understood that sometimes the most advanced civilizations forgot the most basic truths. Tomorrow, Marcus would return. Not as a lowly human cleaner, but as someone who might hold the key to saving the future emperor's life. The irony wasn't lost on him that the most powerful being in the galaxy had a son whose life now depended on the kindness of the very species they considered inferior. In the medical wing, sophisticated alien machines continued their useless monitoring while Prince Therion slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, his small body slowly beginning to heal thanks to something as simple as clean water and human compassion. 3 days had passed since Marcus first encountered Prince Therion, and each night he had managed to slip back into the medical wing during his cleaning rounds. The young prince's condition was steadily improving with proper hydration and the simple nutritional supplements that Marcus smuggled from the human food stores. But Marcus knew they were running out of time. The Imperial physicians were growing frustrated with their patients' mysterious recovery periods, followed by sudden relapses whenever Marcus couldn't visit. They were talking about more aggressive treatments that could kill the child. On the 4th night, Marcus arrived to find Prince Therion sitting up in bed, his scales showing the first hints of their natural golden luster. The dark veins had almost completely disappeared, and his amber eyes held a brightness that hadn't been there before. "Marcus!" Therion whispered excitedly as the human entered with his cleaning cart. "I felt strong enough to walk to the window today. The doctors think it's a miracle." Marcus smiled as he approached the bed, carrying a small container of nutrient-rich soup he had prepared in the human quarters' communal kitchen. It wasn't much, just vegetables and protein cubes dissolved in water, but it contained the balanced minerals that Thyrian's body desperately needed. "How are you feeling, buddy?" Marcus asked, checking the child's forehead for fever. The simple gesture of human touch seemed to comfort the young prince, who had never experienced such gentle care. "Much better, but—" Thyrian hesitated, his voice dropping to an even quieter whisper. "The doctors are planning something tomorrow. I heard them talking about emergency intervention procedures." They sounded scared. Marcus's stomach dropped. Emergency interventions in Zephyrian medicine often meant invasive surgeries or experimental treatments. For a child as young and weakened as Thyrian, such procedures could be fatal. "Thyrian, I need to ask you something important," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of the massive bed. "Do you trust me?" The young prince nodded without hesitation. "You're the only one who made me feel better. Everyone else just makes me hurt more. I think I know what's really wrong with you and how to fix it completely. But it would mean leaving this room, leaving the palace. Are you brave enough for that?" Thyrian's eyes widened. "Leave the palace? But I'm the crown prince. Father would—" "Your father thinks you're dying," Marcus said gently. "The doctors think you're dying, but you're not. You're suffering from something my people call environmental poisoning. The air in this palace, the processed foods, even the water they've been giving you through those machines. It's all wrong for your body." Marcus had spent the last few days observing everything in Thyrian's environment. The palace's air was heavily filtered and artificially enhanced with chemicals meant to preserve the building's crystalline structures. The intravenous nutrients were synthetic, designed by computers rather than grown naturally. Even the water was so purified that it lacked essential minerals. "Young Zephyrians need natural elements to develop properly," Marcus continued, drawing on knowledge he'd gained from secretly accessing the palace's database during his cleaning duties. "But everyone's forgotten that, because they've been living in artificial environments for so long. Your body is trying to tell them what it needs, but they keep giving you more artificial solutions." "How do you know all this?" Thyrian asked, amazed that this human cleaner understood something the greatest doctors in the galaxy had missed. Marcus smiled sadly. "Because humans have made these same mistakes before. Before your people conquered Earth, we had learned that sometimes the old ways were better than the new ones. We had to relearn how to live naturally after our technology almost killed us." The sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. But instead of the measured steps of guards, these were the clicking talons of Dr. Vexhai, the head imperial physician. Marcus quickly moved to his cart and began mopping, while Thyrian lay back down and closed his eyes. Dr. Vexhai entered the room with two assistants, their reptilian faces grim with determination. They spoke in rapid Zephyrian, but Marcus had picked up enough of the language to understand the general meaning. Tomorrow morning they would perform a full neural intervention, essentially rewiring parts of Thyrian's nervous system in hopes of stopping his degenerative condition. After the doctors left, Marcus made his decision. "Thyrian, we're leaving tonight." "What? How?" The young prince sat up, fear and excitement warring in his expression. "I've been studying the palace layouts during my work," Marcus explained, pulling out a hand-drawn map he'd been creating. "There's a service tunnel system that connects to the old mining shafts in the mountains. I can get us out through there." "But where would we go? The entire galaxy belongs to the Dominion." Marcus pointed to a section of his map. "About 50 miles from here, there's an abandoned research station. It was built back when your people first studied this planet, before they started terraforming everything. The environment there is still natural, untouched by artificial systems." Thyrian stared at the map, then at Marcus. "You're risking your life for me. Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus thought about his answer carefully. "Because you're just a kid who's sick and I know how to help you. That's enough." But there was more to it, and Marcus knew it. In Therion, he saw a chance to prove that humans weren't the inferior species the galaxy believed them to be. Their knowledge, their compassion, their ability to see simple solutions to complex problems. Maybe that was worth something after all. "If we do this," Marcus said, "there's no going back until you're completely well. It might take weeks, maybe months. The Emperor will think you're dead." "He already acts like I'm dead," Therion said quietly. "At least with you. I feel alive." That night, as the palace slept, Marcus carefully wrapped Therion in cleaning cloths and placed him in the bottom section of his cart, covering him with dirty laundry. The young prince was small enough to fit and weak enough that the journey would be difficult, but Marcus had prepared for that. They moved through the service corridors Marcus knew by heart, avoiding the main guard routes. At several checkpoints, guards glanced at the human janitor and his cart without interest. Who would suspect that the crown prince of the galaxy was being smuggled out in a laundry basket by a lowly cleaner? The escape took 4 hours, navigating through maintenance tunnels, abandoned mining shafts, and finally emerging into the natural wilderness beyond the palace's terraformed grounds. As they reached the old research station, Therion breathed real air for the first time in his life, air that hadn't been processed and purified and stripped of its natural properties. "It smells different," Therion said in wonder, looking up at stars that weren't filtered through energy shields. "This is what your homeworld used to smell like," Marcus said, helping the young prince into the abandoned but still functional research station. "Before the terraforming, before the cities. This is what your people evolved to live in." As Marcus set up a simple camp inside the station and prepared natural food over a basic fire, Prince Therion felt something he had never experienced before: true hunger. Not the artificial cravings induced by synthetic nutrients, but the deep, satisfying hunger of a body that was finally beginning to heal itself. Within hours of breathing natural air and drinking water from a mountain stream, Therion's scales began to shine brighter than they had in months. The transformation was remarkable, but Marcus knew it was just the beginning. The real test would come in the days ahead. As they lived simply in the wilderness while the most powerful being in the galaxy searched for his missing son. 6 weeks had passed since Marcus and Prince Therion disappeared from the palace, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The young prince now stood tall and strong, his golden scales gleaming with health, his amber eyes bright with intelligence and energy he had never possessed before. Living in the natural environment, eating simple foods, drinking pure mountain water, and breathing unfiltered air had restored him to perfect health. But their peaceful existence was about to end. Marcus woke one morning to the sound of atmospheric ships descending from the sky. Through the research station's windows, he could see the massive Imperial fleet surrounding their location, hundreds of vessels blocking out the sun. At the center of the formation was the Emperor's personal dreadnought, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian. "They found us," Marcus said quietly, gently waking Therion. The young prince sat up, showing no fear despite the overwhelming display of force outside. "Father's here." "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked. They had discussed this moment many times over the past weeks. Therion would return to his father, but he would also tell the truth about what had happened. "I'm ready," Therion said with confidence that had grown during their time together. "And Marcus, no matter what happens, thank you for showing me what it means to be truly alive." The station's doors were blasted open moments later, and Emperor Vorthak himself strode through, his massive frame filling the entrance. Behind him came a squad of elite guards and Dr. Vexhai, all expecting to find the Crown Prince dead or dying after weeks of primitive conditions. Instead, they found Prince Therion standing tall and healthy, his scales more brilliant than they had ever been, his posture proud and strong. The Emperor stopped in his tracks, his great golden eyes wide with shock. "Therion?" The Emperor's voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Father," Therion said formally, but there was warmth in his voice that had never been there before. "I'm sorry you were worried, but I had to get better. The doctors couldn't help me, but Marcus could." Every eye in the room turned to Marcus, who stood calmly beside the young prince, despite being surrounded by beings who could kill him with a thought. Dr. Vexhai hissed in disbelief. "Impossible! This human vermin kidnapped the crown prince. He's probably been poisoning the boy's mind with primitive superstitions." Emperor Vorthak's gaze fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a burning star. "Human!" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Explain yourself before I turn you to ash." Marcus stepped forward, showing no fear. "Your Majesty, your son was dying because your doctors were treating the symptoms instead of the cause. Prince Therion wasn't suffering from a mysterious disease. He was suffering from living in a completely artificial environment that was wrong for his species." "Absurd!" Dr. Vexhai spat. "Our medical facilities are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Advanced doesn't always mean better," Marcus replied calmly. "Young Zephyrians need natural elements to develop properly. Natural air, natural water, natural food. Your palace is so processed and artificial that it was slowly poisoning him." Emperor Vorthak looked from Marcus to his son, who stood healthier than he had ever been. "You're saying that my heir, the future ruler of the galaxy, was saved by primitive human knowledge?" "Not primitive, Your Majesty. Simple. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one." Dr. Vexhai moved forward aggressively. "This human is lying. He's probably used some kind of chemical enhancement on the prince. We should dissect him to learn his secrets." "Touch him, and you'll answer to me," Therion said firmly, his young voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone present. "Marcus risked his life to save mine when all of you failed. He deserves respect, not threats." The Emperor stared at his son, seeing not just the physical transformation, but a strength of character that hadn't been there before. "Therion, tell me exactly what happened." For the next hour, Prince Therion recounted everything. How the doctors had failed to help him, how Marcus had shown him simple kindness and basic care, how living naturally had restored his health completely. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had learned important truths about himself and his world. When Therion finished his story, the Emperor was silent for a long moment. Finally, he looked directly at Marcus. "Human, you took my son without permission. By law, that is a capital crime." Marcus nodded. "I understand, Your Majesty, but I couldn't watch him die when I knew how to help him. You also saved his life when my finest doctors could not. You showed him kindness when others showed only cold efficiency. You taught him things about his own nature that we had forgotten." The Emperor's voice grew thoughtful. "Tell me, what do you think this means?" Marcus met the Emperor's gaze steadily. "I think it means that maybe humans aren't as inferior as everyone believes. Maybe different species have different strengths. Maybe the galaxy would be better if we learned from each other, instead of just one species ruling all the others." A dangerous silence filled the room. Several guards shifted nervously, expecting their emperor to incinerate this audacious human for such blasphemous suggestions. Instead, Emperor Vorthak began to laugh, a sound like distant thunder that grew into a roar of genuine amusement. "Bold words from a janitor," the Emperor said when his laughter subsided. "But looking at my son, I cannot argue with your results." He turned to Dr. Vexhai. "Doctor, you will immediately begin studying natural healing methods. If this human is correct, our entire medical approach may need revision." "But Your Majesty," the doctor protested. We cannot allow primitive species to dictate policy to the Dominion. Doctor, the Emperor's voice turned cold. My son is alive and healthy because a primitive human understood something you did not. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered what primitive actually means. The Emperor then looked at Marcus with new interest. Human, I have a proposition for you. Serve as my son's personal advisor and teacher. Help him understand both advanced and natural ways of living. In return, I will grant you full citizenship in the Dominion and a position of respect in my court. Marcus glanced at Therion, who was grinning with excitement. I would be honored, Your Majesty, but I have one condition. Every being in the room gasped. No one made conditions with the Dragon Emperor. Speak, Vorthak said, his voice dangerously quiet. All humans in the Dominion should be given the opportunity to contribute their knowledge and skills, not just serve as laborers. We might be physically weaker than other species, but we have different ways of seeing problems. That could be valuable. Prince Therion stepped forward. Father, Marcus is right. Humans notice things we miss because they think differently. That's why he could help me when no one else could. Emperor Vorthak studied Marcus for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Very well. I will establish a new advisory council that includes representatives from all species, including humans. If your people can demonstrate the same wisdom you have shown, they will earn their place through merit. As they prepared to return to the palace, Prince Therion walked beside Marcus, no longer the sickly, ignored child he had been. You did more than save my life, he said quietly. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, and that the most important power is the power to help others. Marcus smiled. You're going to be a great emperor someday, Therion. Better than any who came before you. Because I learned from the best teacher, the prince replied. A human who saw me as a person worth saving, even when the rest of the galaxy saw humans as nothing at all. As the Imperial fleet returned to the palace, Emperor Vorthak found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the galaxy he ruled. Perhaps true strength wasn't just about power and technology. Perhaps it was also about compassion, wisdom, and the courage to help others, even when they seemed beyond help. The human Marcus had shown all of these qualities and more. And if one human could possess such wisdom, perhaps the entire species deserved a chance to prove their worth. The age of human expansion in the galaxy had begun, not through conquest or rebellion, but through the simple act of one man showing kindness to a sick child when no one else would. Sometimes the greatest revolutions start with the smallest acts of compassion.